Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my Masters in Business Administration and Clinical Psychology, I today wish to talk about discernment, our ability to discern. So being associated with a few organizations in the capacity of a counselor, a therapist, and a coach, I got an opportunity to have this beautiful and this profound insight by somebody who was in the recovery for a particular kind of a substance overuse which had turned into abuse. So one of the days during one of our counseling or coaching sessions, we were talking and discussing about changing our habits. And of course, as the session and the time moved ahead, there were certain other aspects that also came into the conversation, into the interaction, which comprised of the words and the emotions and the sentiments with regards to doing things that we are unfamiliar with, which is why they also feel hard, which is why they also seem hard. We also talked about resiliency. We also talked about tenacity. And we also interacted about not giving up. And maybe not giving up easily as well, which is very amazingly and surprisingly, one of the group members very candidly said, when we as people who have been habituated to abusing and overusing certain substances or certain behavior patterns, i.e. we as addicts, are also people who do not give up, or rather give up easily, and we are pretty tenacious. We are pretty dedicated as individuals. And of course, not giving up over there and being tenacious and being dedicated, at least in that spectrum, in that context, has mostly not been a very helpful thing. Which not only pleasantly surprised me, but it also stopped me on my track. To then reflect and to understand that discernment is about understanding the context in which the content is presented. It's about understanding the nuances within the context, the details within the context, to be able to comprehend a content or the content. And like I said, it stopped me on my track and made me take a pause to reflect. It also tells us that discernment is about being able to take that pause, is about having the ability to reflect. And reflection is quite difficult without having a pause, without having a breather to think through things. It's also about our ability to be present with the nuances, to be able to be attentively present to it, present with it. Discernment is also about having the ability to respond. For as Viktor Frankl had said, that between every stimulus and a reaction, there's a space and a time. And within that space and time is our ability to generate a response. And maybe to a degree, it's also about the ability to laugh at one's own self and to be able to present such a serious matter, such a thought-provoking matter in such a candid manner, while seriously still retaining the ability to work at yourself, to work with yourself, within yourself, while sharing such beautiful and delightful wisdom. And in keeping with the same thought and the same sentiment, in keeping with giving up, in keeping with letting go, I also had this conversation with the fabric dealer with whom I had worked with earlier, in the capacity of a fashion designer and a trousseau designer, wherein he had started his second line of business with regards to furniture, or getting customized furniture done. And he'd also gotten his cards printed, and he'd shared a few of his cards with me in keeping with the furniture business, so that I could move them ahead, so that I could circulate that ahead, in a way helping him promote his other business venture as well. And when I had revisited him a while later, at least a couple of years later, and I asked him about his other venture, he told me that he'd let go of the idea of taking up that business ahead. He told me that I and my brothers gave up on the idea of running that venture, of investing in that venture, because it wasn't generating the returns that we had anticipated or that we would have wanted for ourselves. And invariably I asked him, are you talking about profits? Like generating returns, does it equal to profits? And he very sweetly laughed and said that profits come much later. We as businessmen understand that. But there is a certain return on the investment that we all expect, and it has to be reciprocal. It has to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, it becomes very distressing and leads to conflicts and resentments. And none of that is profitable, both on the professional and the personal front. And taking these examples as the reference point, we need to pause to be able to reflect, to then develop the ability to discern of what we need to drop, of what we need to let go of what we need to give up on. For many times we may stay in places and situations, in relationships, both personally and professionally. We overdo certain things a lot longer than required, even when it's not mutually reciprocal. We tend to overshare where sharing could just have been enough. We tend to overinvest our time and our other resources, even our lives, where a mutually reciprocal investment could have been looked into and should have been a wise thing to do, where a mutual reciprocity should and could have been enough. And I can think of two good examples via Hindi or Bollywood movies, which in a way to a degree can draw the parallels, symbolically, metaphorically, to expand, to elaborate on that. One being the example of the movie PK, wherein this particular father was far more invested and interested and spent far more time and his resources and thereby his life on the teachings and the pravachan of some guru, of some leader, unfortunately without using his own discernment, which in a way had caused the distress within the child-parent relationship. And the other movie that I can think about is Dil Dhadakne, wherein the people in their most personal intimate relationships, despite being unhappy and despite being miserable, stayed in them far longer, unfortunately repeating and co-creating and recreating the same familiar dynamics over and over and over again through the course of a lot of years, or at least a few years, which was physically and emotionally taxing and unfortunately was not mutually healthy, wasn't mutually supportive. Because in any interaction, we are essentially talking about teamwork. And teamwork, when it's not mutually supportive, is mutually distressing. And that's not to say that they should have moved out of the relationship or they should have broken the relationship. But they could have also let go of the dynamics, of the patterns that they had kept repeating, taking an external help, taking an external intervention, like some sort of family counseling or some sort of couple counseling, or even a teamwork counseling. They could have learned to develop newer ways of interacting and newer ways of rebuilding the same team, but in a newer way, with newer abilities to interact and to respond. And in a way, through the movie PK, we also come to understand that when the father gave up on the relationship, when he let go of the relationship or the relationship dynamic with that particular Guruji, he rebuilt, he recreated a better relationship, a better dynamic with his own daughter, with his own child. And so maybe just through that interaction I was made to realize that at times giving up and what and why we are giving up on may not necessarily be a bad thing, may not necessarily be an act of somebody who is not resilient, may not necessarily be an act of somebody who is not hardworking, may not necessarily be an act of somebody who is not sincere and dedicated and disciplined, but rather it's about developing the ability, the responsibility to discern, to be able to respond thoughtfully and not react and enact the same old, the same old. Let's try and develop our ability to discern so that we are able to respond better, with a lot more insight, with a little lighter heart, and with a lot more compassion for ourselves and for others. Let's try and take pauses to bring that into practice, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.